The age verification and attestation fight marches on. The Colorado bill has passed the Senate, off to the governor's desk, and it includes a provision for free and open source software. Is that enough? And does that even matter? Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we do want to talk a little bit about this Colorado bill. We want to talk about the FOSS provision, the debate that has raged over it, and does it really matter in the end? So, exciting little bill, of course, to bring you up to speed if you have just been emerging out and learning about everybody and their brother wanting you to show your ID to get on the internet. First, there are a couple things. There are age verification, like the one proposed in Texas, and I think was it Mississippi or Alabama? And these ones, the Texas one is presently injuncted. This required you to verify your actual age. So verification means you have to submit some form of verification that you are over 18 to some source which provides a signal back, external third-party verified. That's terrifying because third parties is where all these breaches occur, right? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean flashing your ID. The ways proposed are, number one would be flashing an ID. Number two way might be a AI facial scan of your face. Option 3 might be the use of a credit card. Option 4, in some cases, may be the age of the account itself. YouTube accounts have existed for over 20 years. If you had a YouTube account when it first started, likely you are over 20 years of age. Apple is not absolutely verifying everybody's ID because many people with an Apple account have either had it for over 20 years or have had it with a credit card number attached to it. If there's any of those, they're just auto-verifying those accounts. So most people will not see these. The biggest challenge is going forward, creating a new account, you may have to have some form of proof that you are over the age. That is a verification bill. Now, the Colorado and the California bills, these are age attestation bills. Now, if we have to have some of these nonsense crap pushed upon us, I want the attestation bills rather than the verification. The verification is nanny state. Yes, the conservative states are pushing out the nanny state in this case. The Democratic states tend to be pushing out the parental rights states. And what those ones will basically say is, yeah, there has to be a means to set up an age signal that a person can set up the age signal themselves. There's no outside independent verification of it. So I can create a new laptop, and if it's for my kid, I can say this laptop is for a 13-year-old, and then that age signal gets sent out, and there's no external verification. So that's why the attestation versus verification is an important distinction to make. Now, what we're probably going to see, because of the way the evil world marches, is that the world is going to start looking at going, well, this attestation, you can easily lie. It's no different than these old forms that just pop up and say, are you over 18? Yes, of course I'm over 18, right? And so I think the world will march towards the verification, especially as more companies pop up, more third-party leaky vendors pop up. They pinky promise and spit shake they won't share that information. They'll just leak them all over the place like a Amazon S3 calendar, right? But the reality is that these bills are marching forward, and there has been some level of fight. And when the Colorado age attestation bill was proposed, System 76, a Colorado-based company, reached out to the local politicians to get some wording put in there for a FOSS Carve Out. And so we have here the bill as it was passed in Colorado. This was passed the House, passed the Senate. It's off to the governor's desk, and it's mostly what we have described in our prior videos. So you can have a look at the prior videos. But what they ended up adding down here, So having looked down here, the provisions that were added is on page 9 of the Senate bill, which goes to the governor's desk. This is prepared, passed by the House and Senate to the governor's desk. The article does not apply to, and thanks to System 76, we have this provision. An operating system provider or developer that distributes an operating system or application under license terms that permit the recipient to copy, redistribute, and modify the software without any platform-imposed technical or contractual restrictions imposed by the provider or developer on installing all modified versions. So in other words, this is a FOSS carve out to say, yes, we have a bill, and if you happen to have some open source software that is free to distribute and modify, it does not necessarily apply to this. So things like the MIT license do not have any of these carve-outs or things like that. But some of these bills actually do. And that's where we get into the discussion about the GPL license. Because if you go down into the GPL license, under additional terms, additional permissions are applicable to the entire program shall be treated as though they were included in the license to the extent they are valid under applicable law. When you convey a copy of a covered work, you may, at your option, remove any permissions from that copy or from any part of it. Any additional permissions may be written to require their own removal in certain cases when you modify the work. You may place additional permissions on material added by you to a covered work for which you can have or can give appropriate copyright permission. And effectively, though, what it has been proposed is that this is contractual ruling. That was, in fact, a video that Brian Lunduke had done. And this is an excellent video if you want to have a look at what that is. Now, what his argument is that the open source exemption does not include GPL because of this provision allowing you to make a change to this copyrighted work. It basically says, hey, here is additional requirements you can have. And remember, the wording of the bill says without platform imposed technological or contractual restrictions. And if GPL has contractual restrictions, is it possible that that is a violation of this? And so because of that clause, the GPL may or may not apply. This is actually the same argument Only Office is using in accusing Nextcloud and EuroOffice of violation of licenses. So you remember EuroOffice and Nextcloud? They had a spat with Only Office, and Only Office says, hey, we put in contractual requirements into the GPL requiring you to maintain our logo or our likeness and things like this. And this is what Nextcloud and things came out and said, no, that's not the case. In fact, Bradley Kuhn, the creator of the GPL license, supports Nextcloud's position that they do not. So is this contractual obligation or not under this? That is what Brian Lunduke is asking about. So we have this fight between Only Office and Nextcloud over the contractual additions of this terms inside of the GPL, and the Colorado bill says, hey, as long as there's no contractual restrictions imposed, it is exempt. But what Brian Lunduke's argument here is that since there are contractual obligations under the GPL optionally, that the GPL license may not actually apply to the Colorado bill. That's the argument. Now, do I buy the argument or not? I'll be honest with you, I don't know. The problem is the ruling in the GPL is vague, and the ruling under the law is vague. So it's going to be up to anybody to put both of these systems in, test them under court, and when somebody is challenged, see what the courts happen to say. Now, I personally think that this entire fight and debate and discussion is a useless cause for a number of reasons. The first is Colorado is one state out of 50. It is not even the whole of the country. There are other bills which are far more dangerous, far more widespread, that this would only really apply. Ultimately, this is a tip of the hat to System 76. and good job for getting that in here. I just don't think it applies specifically, and I just think it's a way to protect System 76, so it's good it's here. But for the rest of us who are not operating within Colorado state law or adjacent to it, it doesn't really matter to begin with. So I'm not going to spend a ton of my time trying to parse out all the legality of it. We'll just comment on it when actual trials come up. Now, the problem is this FOSS Carve Out also does not apply to any other state. California's law is already signed into law. Texas already signed into law. Mississippi already signed into law. A dozen other states already signed into law. None of those have a FOSS Carve Out either. Will those be amended to add it? Maybe. Ultimately, though, in America, now this is not Brazil or any other country, this entirety law under the spirit of the Constitution is actually already a moot point. There have already been court cases which have demonstrated that software is a protected First Amendment speech, which means the government cannot compel a programmer to add a line of code to test for age or do anything else. The government, under current United States judicial law, tested in court, the government cannot compel any organization or person to write a certain line of code into their program. So on a constitutional attack, these ultimately should fail if the courts are working properly. Are the courts working properly? That's a different discussion for a different panel that wants to get a lot more political. And to be honest, if it does go to there, I don't know which side of the court's going to be taken with, because frankly, I think that a lot of social issues, the conservative tends to have, in my opinion, a better view. But when you get into the technical arenas, I think in many instances, the Democratic side, the liberal side, has a little bit better view. So I don't know where to sit. Even with the copyright issues, with the the ISPs, Cox Communications, the ISPs, and the piracy stuff, both of the court came down split, both agreeing to overturn for two completely different reasons. And frankly, I like both of the reasons. But the ultimate muster here is, does it really matter in the end? I think we need to keep on moving through and pushing through and resisting as much as we possibly can. We need to comply with the law to the minimal amount that we can. We need to maintain the spirit of open source software. And we should probably be focusing on the distributions which take more of a stand against this type of surveillance state than those who turn tail to it. But we can't be too hard on those, especially if they're large organizations. Like if UK comes down with a required age attestation or verification, is Canonical going to give up everything it is to fight against them? Probably not. But should a small distribution with not much to lose? Maybe putting up a good fight is absolutely worth it, if nothing else, for the headlines and for the popularity and to raise awareness of what is going. So in my opinion, it doesn't really matter if this complete GPL issue applies or doesn't apply under this particular bill. That's what the bill happens to say. I just think here in the United States, a developer cannot be compelled any form of speech inside of their program. And so I think it fails on the First Amendment of the Constitution. But we'll see what the world happens to do. All I want to see is a lot of fighting back and pushing back against this system, trying to identify everybody on the internet. Let's go back to parents parenting their kids, because that's where all this started with. Don't neglect your children and then whine at the world for not taking care of them. That's your responsibility. So let me know your thoughts about all this in the comments down below.